People are past the point of being interested in the debate of whether climate change is real or not. They just say, I want somebody to do something about this.
And you can debate all day long whether it's man-made or not. That is actually not the point.
It's amazing how few people want to talk about climate change. They want to totally dismiss it.
The climate in the long term can have an impact on human health.
What do we save? Who do we save? Do we save these wonderful national monuments? Do we save the culture? Do we save the people?
If we look just at the environment without looking at the economic and social structure, we're missing two parts of a very important equation.
Businesses are just as exposed to climate change as individuals, as communities, as the environment.
But we really need to focus on our vulnerable populations, our elderly, our disabled, our economically challenged. We know they're our most at-risk population. We just know that.
Can big problems be solved in the present political environment? And the answer, unfortunately, is I don't know.
But the bottom line is that what is undeniable here, what is undeniable is that sea level has risen and it is rising faster than it was.
Funding for this program is provided by the Medical University of South Carolina, Public Information and Community Outreach. MUSC, changing what's possible.
From the rocky coasts of Maine to the warm beaches of Florida, the Atlantic coast and the ocean beyond provide Americans with many of the things that make life worth living. The Atlantic connects, divides, and defines. It's a muse for poets and a subject for artists. And let's face it, on a warm summer day, there's hardly a better place to be than a sandy shore. Science and observation tell us that sea levels are rising, though there's hardly anywhere where it's more apparent than right here at Hunting Island State Park in South Carolina. Here at the water's edge, it's easy to see the damage that's done by rising sea levels and storm surge. And when this happens, this historically popular state park has to close to visitors. It's got eroding beaches and incredibly damaged dunes. And now, all but 2 of the cabins that formerly dotted this island are completely gone. And it's not an isolated example. Along the 200-mile stretch of coastline that runs from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, down to Savannah, Georgia, which, by the way, is home to a rapidly growing population, military bases, port cities, tourist destinations, and a thriving seafood economy, a rising tide of uncertainty is accompanying rising sea levels. It's all about change, sea change.
You see this beautiful harbor behind us. In the last 100 years, it's already known that it's risen 18 inches. Over the next 30 to 40 years, it's projected it could easily rise another 1.5 to 2.5 feet, 18 to 30 inches. So if you look at the existing, quote, nuisance flooding that we have, if you add another 2 feet on top of that, it's projected that downtown Charleston and major parts of West Ashley and really coastal South Carolina could not only have nuisance flooding, but flooding that directly impacts our daily lives.
The greater Grand Strand is very vulnerable to what's going to happen with climate change. It's the rising ocean, it's the marine life, it's our tourism, it's the cultural effects, like for example the sweetgrass baskets. They are a part of our culture and they're going to disappear when the sweetgrass disappears.
You know, I see some of the sweetgrass seem as though it's dying at the roots of it. And I think it's probably from the water level that it sits so long and start rotting in the root of it. I think the sea level has something to do with that.
Of course, climate change is going to have a tremendous effect on our cultural resources, particularly in our coastal parks, but it could be any park, really, because we When we look at the climate change science, we know it's not just coastal effects, drought, erosion, storm events. These are things that are not limited to the coast. So all of our park projects are being affected by climate change, and I think that's the reason why the National Park Service has implemented a climate change response strategy.
There's no way that you can deny that we have more high water events, whether it's on the U.S. Highway 80 causeway heading out to Tybee Island, and even the storms that affect us. Whether it's the marsh degradation, again, potentially the settling of our dike system, and a number of different factors. I mean, it's something that it's eye-opening, when you come out here, especially on any of the spring or king tides that we have, where you see how close the water is on a perfectly sunny, beautiful day. And then you add in the specter of a huge storm coming through here with a large storm surge and the kind of damage that it can be. I mean, the weather is awesome, and it's something that you have to be careful of, you have to be watchful and mindful of.
You can ride through the South Carolina low country, whether it's Georgetown, Charleston, Colleton County, and you go across where lots of islands and they're connected by causeways. And it is not rare that on a high tide, or particularly a king tide, these causeways are already covered.
I'm seeing more and more and more the effects of flooding at high tides during some storms, and not even significant storms, just a nice storm that comes in the evening because it's hot, or during the day. I'm seeing the effects on farming with floods happening in fields. I'm just seeing it on accessibility on our roadways, being able to get to one community and not being able to get to another.
I think that climate change is probably, and I don't necessarily spend a lot of time in hyperbole, but I think it is probably the most significant issue facing us as a human species today. It has been through the last 50 to 75 years in particular that we've been collecting data. We have been analyzing that data. We have been able to empirically, by observation and experimentation, show that our planet is changing. Not just changing, but changing on a very rapid basis.
When we're concerned about possible warming of the climate, we have to ask ourselves, what impact can warming of the air in the atmosphere have to do or have on mosquito-borne diseases? So there are several ways to answer that. One way is to think that as the climate warms, that insects which are more common in tropical or equatorial regions would be able to survive and thrive at higher latitudes north of the equator, or for our friends in South America, south of the equator as well. So that we have a change in latitude, and what might be a disease that we think about as being in South America or Central America or the Caribbean could start to creep up further north into the USA.
Climate change is a global phenomenon. Doesn't mean everybody gets the same deal, right? Change happens and kind of plays out regionally, and there's lots of feedbacks within the system on different temporal and spatial scales. So you could be in one area that has not been getting a lot of change, saying this is not happening. You can be in another area that is experiencing a lot of change and going, anecdotally, I perceive it happening. And so there's a lot of that kind of complexity within the system that influences, I think, people's perceptions.
People can see it, they can feel it, they can touch it in ways that weren't the case. I mean, literally, you're seeing the effects of flooding. Our farm flooded in a way that I've never seen over the course of my 57 years on Earth with this last storm. And you're also seeing a level of consensus within the scientific community that's never been there before.
The climate change issues that a place like Tybee Island are going to face in the future are really no different than the ones that they've been facing for as long as they've been there, which is these barrier islands of sand are dunes that move around, and once you build roads and houses and infrastructure on them, you tend to want to stabilize that sand dune, and they've done all manner of stabilization over the years. Groins, jetty, riprap, pumping sand and renourishment seems to be the main choice now, but this is just an ongoing process, and with sea level rise, it's just going to have to continue and it's going to have to keep up, and the infrastructure on the island is going to have to keep up. The roads are going to have to be raised or a bridge made if you want to maintain the community and the economy of a vulnerable barrier island.
During the recent storm, Hurricane Matthew, it was brought to our attention, and really what I thought was a profound statement of the impact that Hunting Island had with the destruction that Matthew did for Hunting Island. And someone said, but you know what? Hunting Island did her job and protected Beaufort. And so it's the natural part of a barrier island protecting the mainland, but it's also that complicated standpoint of Hunting Island and renourishing and taking care of this beach protects infrastructure like roads, water, sewer, economic infrastructure. All of those kind of things have to be brought into play when you make the decisions of do we continue to renourish, do we continue to maintain and preserve and protect these islands.
When you're talking about climate change and sea level rise, there is a really a direct effect on our groundwater systems here in the coastal community. And the Chatham County and coastal Georgia area, even portions of Florida and whatnot, we pull our drinking water from the ground, from the Floridan aquifer as a whole. Huge system and highly pristine system. So when you start to see, as behind us, the Savannah River, which is directly synced up with where we're pulling our groundwater system, you start to, over time, you will possibly see an impact, of climate change, higher waters, higher tides, and that water is going to push further up the Savannah River, basically. And then you can possibly see an impact on your drinking water systems.
Several of the surface water intakes in the Wynyard Bay area are actually in play when you look at the current projections of sea level rise, which would ultimately mean that if you have any type of saltwater intrusion, you would lose a good quantity of your current freshwater supply. Now that within itself may be tenuous. When you couple that to the population growth, that becomes not just a passing concern, but a serious concern to lose any access to freshwater supplies.
Rising sea level, increases in salinity, and an overall rise in temperature are clearly having an impact on our coastal communities and beyond. There's historic flooding, much more powerful storm surges, and many other threats to our environment. But what are the impacts? How severe and how far do they go beyond what we so easily see, like here on a barrier island? And what about our health? How are the dynamics of so much change presenting new health issues or exacerbating existing ones?
The health impacts for the people on the ground from climate change will include a lot of ailments that relate to heat stress, strokes, respiratory diseases, digestive diseases, as well as an exacerbation of illnesses that already exist, pre-existing conditions. Those are the vulnerable people that we're talking about. What will happen to them is our concern, because many of those people still, unfortunately, do not have health care. They do not visit their doctors regularly. They do not have a system that will protect them and help to decrease the impacts and help them address what they're already dealing with.
When there are heat waves, some people have heat stroke, and sometimes you even hear about people dying, for example. Often older people who are living perhaps without air conditioning, but that would be a direct effect of the heat. Another example could be increased severe weather. This year we've seen that with, for example, hurricanes and flooding in Texas and Florida and Puerto Rico and so forth. And the weather experts can explain that to us in greater detail. But as the atmosphere warms, we have more moisture content in the air and more chance for hurricanes and heavy rainfall. But from my point of view as a communicable disease physician, the change that I'm most concerned about that could relate to weather might be changes in what are called vector-borne diseases. And vector-borne diseases are infectious diseases where the transmission from one person to another It's not made through direct contact or through respiratory droplets, but where a vector, usually an insect, is carrying the virus or some other pathogen from one person to another.
We had a scare here just recently with Zika virus. Who's ever been talking about Zika virus or, yellow fever, things like that in the United States? Well, in part because we had a winter that came through and sort of cleared these things out for the next season, with the exception of maybe Florida and Puerto Rico and parts of Texas. If you have a warming climate and all of a sudden we move to more and more of a tropical climate in Georgia and South Carolina, places like that, it leaves the specter of all kinds of mosquito-borne illnesses and threats and challenges that weren't there. So again, there are a whole host of things that go well beyond sea level rise that come with the possibility of global warming that we all need to be thinking about.
The primary and certainly the most visible impact of climate change is our rising waters, increasing flooding, what some people call nuisance flooding or dry weather flooding, which basically is a function of higher sea levels. We've seen an increase over the past century of almost a foot, about an inch a decade. And what we also now know over the last 2 or 3 decades is that rate is accelerating.
Let's look at the regular tides, let's look at the king tides. Let's look over a period of time at what the change was. And within a year, the water on my dock had risen 8 inches. Now, there could be a lot of reasons. It could be that more people built docks, that the creek isn't flowing. Does it matter if there's 8 more inches there? Because if there's 8 more inches there and we have a king tide, that means there's going to be 8 more inches on top of that. If we have a storm surge of 6 feet, that 6 feet's not going to start here, it's going to start here. So when we talk about 2 and 3 and 4 feet, we're adding that to the rain events, which we, for whatever reason, have been having. We're adding that to the storm surge. So we've got a problem that is automatically going to be compounded by nature.
We try to stay away from the discussion of what's causing climate change and just say, let's look at the reality and let's look at what the records show us. And if you look on NOAA's website, they've got documentation from the early 1900s that show that the tide has risen in Charleston a little over a foot every 100 years. And we expect that to at least be the baseline of what will happen.
The residents here are very familiar with localized flooding. It is something we have always had to deal with. Born and raised in Savannah and Chatham County, and I've known it ever since, obviously I've been here almost 45 years now. And it's something they're familiar with, and they know that it affects their individual property. So we say, okay, in your time, in your life, you've seen an impact. We're now starting to see roads that have, in the past, have never flooded over for a long period of time. We're now seeing those more and more. In the past, maybe once, maybe twice a year. Now we're seeing them every other month, starting to major highways impassable.
Here in the coastal zone, we hear a lot on the news. There'll be flooding in the usual areas at the time of high tide during this rain event because the water level is a little bit higher. And I think if you've lived along the coast for a while, you may have perceived or noticed that these things seem to happen a little bit more frequently over longer periods of time.
Pull the charts. They're fascinating charts that show the number of times downtown flooded over the last 100 years versus over the last, let's say, 20 years or so. It's remarkable. It's real. And the fact is, in places like the coast of South Carolina, we're seeing in real, visible, and tangible form rising effective sea level. And therefore, if you're going to build a road, don't build it where it's going to get flooded every couple of years. Maybe put a little more dirt underneath. And wouldn't that save money over time?
And I think it's interesting to point out, too, a lot of these problems happen because we filled creek beds in over time. So Lockwood Boulevard wasn't there until 1950. So it became an impedance then for drainage interior to the city. And many of the areas that you see in the city that flood so badly, like Fishburne Street and Wentworth Street, you can literally lay over the old map of the city that shows where the creeks are, and that's where the flooding is the severest.
If you go to what we call the point is sort of the Williamsburg of Beaufort. It is the pristinely, totally gentrified neighborhood where people have invested tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars, of fixing up old, important, beautiful antebellum homes. But a lot of that land was built on fill, and a lot of that land you're talking about 12, 14 inches above sea level. And of course they were built up back then, but they weren't built up to face the future.
When we see our streets and rivers overflowing over time, that will prompt the community engagement, the community awareness, and in fact the need for community investment in the infrastructure that will be needed to protect our community long term.
The extreme weather precipitation events, the extreme rain events that we're having, if you couple those with those extreme high tides, you could go from what was a nuisance flooding event 5 years ago to a flash flooding event today, and it can happen very quickly.
We've seen the sea level rising. We've got the documentation, the historical documentation to prove something along the lines of about a foot over the past 80, 85 years. And what that's doing is it's inundating some of my roads on regular king tides and even on some spring tides, where we're seeing 6, 8, 10, 12 inches of water on the roadways during the period of the high tide. And we're getting to a point where we're having to condemn houses because we can no longer provide emergency services to those houses.
With the more recent Hurricane Matthew, I think, whether good or bad, I think that really awakened a lot of folks to the reality of what flooding and climate change and what sea level rise impacts can have on the coastal community.
One of the projections for the changes that we're seeing in the global climate is more intense rainfall events. And I think one can make a case, not statistically arguing this at the moment, but just in the last few years. If you look at the event we had here in South Carolina, kind of historic flooding of this funneling of moisture in that corridor up through Columbia, and the amount of devastation that happened in that regard. And we've seen that event again in Maryland, and then recently in Louisiana, and Houston. These things are happening, and they're happening more frequently. And we're not really prepared for those kinds of events because they're a change from what we're used to in our weather.
The wind and currents from Hurricane Matthew were going from north to south. And it's just remarkable as I explore these small islands around here, how much damage was done, how much shoreline was eroded, and how much debris was blasted through the remaining maritime live oak forest. And that was just a mild, Category 1, 2, mild glancing blow hurricane. A major hurricane coming ashore here, think Katrina, think Sandy, think much greater rearrangement of the geography.
We know we had north to northeast winds or so at the strong points of Matthew as it came up along here. And this area, a lot of this area and to the east toward the ocean was in the western edge of the eye wall of Matthew as it came up. So some of the strongest winds of the storm occurred here along with some of the highest tide levels.
My husband had a 40-foot hunter sailboat, and he had it down in Miami for years, and knew that it wasn't the safest place down there to have it, and decided to do some research about where would be a safer place on the coast. And after a lot of research and talking to friends, it was evident that Data Island Marina was the safest place regarding hurricanes to keep it, but obviously it didn't work out too well for us now. As of Hurricane Matthew. But yeah, our boat is half underwater over there right now.
You can see boats that were washed up on the backyards of these houses in the marsh and as far away as the airport, which I think is 6, 7 miles from here. So they're scattered all up the river. And some of them had sank where they were.
We lost during Matthew, we lost 5 facilities, a campground, a couple of restrooms, and the decision after Matthew is the campground that was the closest to the ocean. We have abandoned that campground, and we have another campground that's further back inland, that's better protected, but we won't rebuild that campground that's right on the ocean. People would love to have a campground right on the ocean, but it's really not sustainable.
We had Hurricane Matthew in October of 2016. We had a tornado rip through the park in May. And then we've just dealt with Hurricane Irma coming through here as well. So I think we're still trying to kind of get our wits about ourselves as to what has taken place over the past year. Because prior to this, there are a number of instances, but very few. In fact, folks have always talked about the Georgia Bight and how we have generally been protected. Now, as interpreters and as historians here, we know that in the 1880s and 1890s, this area was heavily impacted by hurricane activity that, in fact, put a tremendous amount of water inside the fort itself. So the fort is not new to extreme weather events. However, as we have more, well, the situations around us, whether it's sea level rise, whether it's the degradation of the marshland around Cockspur Island and along the Georgia coastline, as well as higher storm surges, we're seeing a lot more impacts, and we will see a lot more impact as we move forward.
Honey Island State Park was impacted greatly by Hurricane Irma. It did a little bit different damage than Hurricane Matthew did. With the first storm, we had a lot of tree damage. With this storm, we had significant flood damage throughout the park. And that salt water came up so high with the storm surge that it got into a lot of our utilities, our power pedestals in the campground, our sewer systems. All that stuff was impacted greatly by it.
The wind was blowing on Irma from the northeast. So it's pushing the Morgan River back up across the runway, which is directly behind me, and then Highway 21, which is off to my right here, running north-south. About 3 feet of storm surge went across Highway 21, so it was completely blocked in this location, along with a number of others. The runway was completely submerged, and houses across the highway that faced a storm surge problem in Matthew faced it again in Irma. In fact, there's one individual over there who had just moved back into his house last week after doing a full remodeling from the Matthew damage. His appliances are still in the cardboard boxes when Irma surge came in, and it's all ruined again.
We just got hit by this latest storm, and we saw a level of flooding that we've never before seen at our family farm, ever. It literally, the storm surge picked up, we have one bridge that goes into a timber track, picked the bridge up off the pilings, moved it about 50 yards off in the marsh, and set it back down. You're like, oh my goodness, that's another weekend project.
We've been very resilient as we recover from everything that's been thrown at us. But it truly is heartbreaking to see all this happen, to have to come back in here and recover. And if we see an uptick in activity and we have to continually do this, it kind of just really beats on you, thinking of what the future really means for Fort Pulaski, what lies ahead. And, it's something that I'm still trying to grapple with.
Our $20 billion tourism industry is at risk. And when the banks realize that the ocean level is rising and the oceanfront properties are going to be underwater in 100 years, pretty soon they're going to start looking. Maybe 50 years from now, they're going to quit lending on the beach. Insurance companies are going to quit insuring on the beach. And so rather than waiting for that day to happen, let's try to be proactive and see how we're going to control the environment so we keep our tourist economy strong.
A huge part of our economic driver in Chatham County is our historic resources through the tourism. Obviously, we're a huge tourism community, but to ensure that we are basically taking into account the economic stability, we also have to ensure that our natural historic resources and all the wonderful resources that we have around us are also taken care of. So it goes very much hand in hand.
Fort Pulaski relies on the fee revenue that we're able to generate at our entrance station. And while we're still going to see the effects over the next couple of years, from this past year, we were closed for a total of 3 months with these 3 incidents. So that's going to affect how we operate, whether it's our hours, who we're able to hire, and what kind of programs we're able to provide our visiting public.
Over $80 billion are generated through tourism in South Carolina $790 million in local and state taxes are paid because of the tourism economy. That generates a lot of jobs for people and impacts on local communities. So when we make decisions, we now have to be conscious and cognizant of the fact that we're making decisions that impact people outside of the gates.
Climate change, it has the potential to wreak so much havoc on the velocity of capital that's found within a community, which is, we're talking to economics here, that it will decrease it to such a level that that community just cannot come back. It's on the precipice, it goes over the precipice, it cannot come back. That is a severe example, but it can happen. We're seeing the first community in the United States that's actually had to be moved because of climate change was in Louisiana last year. They had to move the entire community. So that's at one end of the spectrum. If you go to the other end of the spectrum, take a city like Charleston. In the 70s, Charleston got flooded on average 4 times a year. Last year it was 34 times. 34 days of business interruption, potentially 34 days of supply chain interruption, 34 days of potential lack of revenues from tourism. The result of the fact that can be insurance premiums going up, the cost of business going up. So anytime you have decreases in revenues and increases in expenses, generally not good.
Since tourism is the #1 industry in our state, and especially in Charleston, you can see that, then the restaurants are very much benefited by the seafood being available here. And I think that benefits the men that go out and fix the ice machines, the men that service the trawlers with their fuel and their ice. It also services the people that go out and catch the fish itself, catch the shrimp. And so it's a big part of the South Carolina, and especially the low country economy.
Lives and livelihoods are at stake. So when you think about the fishing industry, for example, if we lose this barrier protection of our salt marshes, the salt marshes themselves are nurseries for all manner of species that sustain the fishing community and sustain human health and consumption.
For the whole country, fisheries are worth $200 billion and employ 1.7 million people. So when these fisheries start to change and move out of the region and take that economic impact with them, it affects our local communities that are involved in not just the fishermen, but the restaurant trade, tourism, and other aspects as well. Fish do have temperature preferences, and that if the water's too warm or too cold, they'll just move. And so that we see in the southeast, for example, we see many fish moving farther north because the their temperature preference is now farther north. So fish that supported important fisheries, or still support important fisheries off of South Carolina, things like blue line tilefish, are now supporting fisheries off of Virginia and Delaware and New Jersey. And things like black sea bass that support a fishery off South Carolina are now supporting a fishery in the Gulf of Maine. So the fish are moving north to find the temperature that they prefer.
The best predictor of the distribution of marine life, things that live in the ocean, are temperature and salinity. As our coast gets warmer and saltier, we're going to see changes in the abundance and distribution of things. Some things will get less abundant, some things will get more abundant. We'll probably see some things we hadn't seen here before, and we may even lose some things. If we lose salt marshes because we don't allow them to migrate upland because we've built those up, and our salt marshes get smaller and smaller, then the habitat, which is nursery for the larval stages of marine life, gets smaller and smaller. And it only makes sense as you decrease the habitat of a nursery, you're going to decrease the productivity in fisheries.
We've sort of drawn lines or drawn barriers and said, no, we have a title to this property, we're not moving, or we're not going to allow the natural progression of the marshes or the oyster reefs to kind of move inland. So that's a particularly difficult thing to deal with, is how do we accommodate the natural movement of estuarine ecosystems if we're going to say, no, we're going to draw a line here and not allow it to move. That I'm that's I guess that's what I call the sea level rise conundrum for us, is just how do we deal with that as a society? How do we accommodate what may need to happen to preserve our estuarine habitats, but at the same time, be respectful of personal rights and things.
We've given some thought to the changes in the salinity and the changes of levels, because we're looking other places to see who's able to produce product that maybe it's not produced here. We're actually looking for different types of product. When I first got here in the 70s, this was a spot and croaker and flounder and whiting business. And now it's a triggerfish, it's a tuna, grouper, salmon. It's a different type of fish that we're bringing in.
People are very familiar with grouper, people are very familiar with snapper, and alternatives to that locally would be triggerfish instead of snapper, or tile fish instead of grouper. Those fish are abundant and delicious. When I talk to fishermen, when I talk to farmers, I'm just blown away at the amount of risk that they have to take. Every day is different, and at any moment they're going to have to make an adjustment, and you have to be willing as a chef to make that adjustment with them and try something different and go a different path.
We are hearing that shrimp are being found in the Chesapeake, where that never has happened before, along with the changing abundant times that we are seeing. It seems like, and I'm not a scientist, but it seems like things are moving northward. What is very different is the summer catches have been significantly diminished. This last year we had about 8 weeks of virtually no shrimp. And that was not just us, it was all along the coast. So we think it is because the water temperature was several degrees above historic levels, and that we know affects shrimp.
We have to close our oyster beds sometimes. Gullah people call it asta. So we have to close our asta beds sometimes, and because of contamination of the runoff. Our fishermen are also affected by this because of the oysters, because of the closing of certain rivers and creeks in this area. It's a huge impact because this is a Gullah way of life.
So the culture, the rituals, the very fabric that coastal people live every day, the shrimping, all of that will be threatened if we don't do something about global warming and climate change.
This is the embarkation site of the majority of people that were enslaved coming from West and Central Africa. Even like the Charleston wharf, Gadsden's wharf, people coming into that location, and then being sent to different plantations throughout South Carolina and here in the Low Country especially. This is the place where we were brought in. West Africans and Gullah people were brought in because of our knowledge of growing, cultivating, and harvesting rice in West Africa. The materials that we have to get to be able to make the coiled sweetgrass baskets are very similar to the materials that we had to get in West Africa to make the sweetgrass baskets there. The sweetgrass, the bulrush, and the palmetto.
This is a part of our heritage. These baskets were being made ever since they brought my ancestors over. They made it and used it for utilitarian work. And down through the years, we started making functional baskets wherein you use in your home.
I was taught this art formed by my mom and my great-grandmother over 49 years ago. I can say for the bulrush, which grows right at the edge of the marsh water, that may come into play because it's, they have to go out with their little boots on, and if that's doing away with the tides and so forth, that takes care of the bulrush. And then the sweetgrass, that's found more on dry land. It's near the water, but on waterfront property. And with that beach erosion and so forth, when it does away with that, there goes the sweetgrass.
Culturally,
we need to be more aware of that. You know, you still have people here who farm, people who, you know, fishing and shrimping and, you know, all the things culturally that helps them to provide for their families.
There is a very close and intimate connection between the people and the land. It's not simply culture as a way of life. It's culture as survival and as future vision, so that you walk the land, you tread the waters, and you understand that there is your life.
The one thing I'm afraid of losing is that land. That land is the foundation of everything. That land is our foundation. I'm worried about losing the land.
So the question's on winners and losers, not just in terms of individuals, but some of the special spots that make, in essence, create the fabric and texture for the society we live in. I think that they could be hardest hit. I mean, I was down at Penn Center the other day, and it's a monument to an incredible period of time in our country's history. It's a monument to the end of one era and the beginning of another, and yet places like that would be very much threatened. So yeah, there's an incredible threat to some of the fabric of who we are as a people. And the saying is, if you don't learn from the past, you're destined to repeat it. Part of learning about your past is actually being able to walk and see it. Oh yeah, this is how this happened, and this is why this happened.
In 100 years, though, I'm not sure what it's going to be. The fort's going to be here. I have no doubt in my mind that, I mean, this is a well-engineered, well-constructed fort that even if there's 5 feet of water and it's an island, it will be here. But while the fort might be here, we're going to have to change the way that we tell the story because it may be surrounded by water. There may be impacts that visitors can't come out here, and that we might be doing programs, you know, online, virtual reality programs, whatever the newest technology is in 100 years. You know, they may not actually be able to stand out here as we are today.
If you follow the news or social media at all, you can't miss the discourse. The debate on an international, national, and even a local level can be bitterly divisive.
I believe that what has polarized the issue, and I think it was an unexpected consequence, was when, at the time, Vice President Al Gore made the piece Inconvenient Truth. And I think what it did, because of his alignment and affiliation, and because of the time in history where we were politically, it all of a sudden framed the topic as a Democratic propaganda issue.
I would say from a political standpoint, it's not so much a lack of awareness of climate change as a denial of the science. You know, we're in a very Republican area, and repeatedly people are hearing climate change is not happening, it's all a figment of the Democrats' imagination. So it's very challenging in this area for politicians to stand up and say, let's look at the data and let's assume that perhaps it might happen, and if that happens, what does it mean for our community?
This has become, we hear it on the news, a political issue, but I think we can get away from the politics if we just focus on facts and leave the politics aside. Because the fact that the Earth's temperature is rising, that's not under dispute. We don't have to argue about the politics of who's causing it. Is it my car, which needs a tune-up and I'm spewing a lot of gas out the back, or your car, or don't we have enough electric cars or whatnot? Is it man-made or not? Those are things that need to be investigated for sure. But the fact of global warming is not a matter of political affiliation. That's a matter of scientific observation.
This is such a complicated, apparently, and more importantly, politicized argument that it becomes difficult for people to get past the ideology or the political affiliation that they feel they're making when they say climate change is or isn't causing a certain thing. But the bottom line is that what is undeniable here, what is undeniable is that sea level has risen and it is rising faster than it was.
The question of whether or not this issue is really on people's radar screen, I would say increasingly it is. If you were to talk to Carlos Cobello, who represents a piece of Miami, what he tells me is that people are talking about it in ways that they never have before, particularly given the fact that his district goes down to the Keys, and old-timers there are seeing things we've never seen before. I used to have this debate with a guy named Tom Coburn, who represented a piece of Oklahoma, and I'd say, well, what's global warming mean to you? I mean, frankly, you're at a couple 100 feet of elevation. Your climate really isn't the greatest, nothing against Oklahoma. What do you care? But if you go to places where people actually retire, which happens to be the coastal regions of this country, we're reaching something of a tipping point given the number of people that are coming to places like Florida, or the coast of Texas, or the coast of South Carolina or Georgia.
Well, government and leadership are elected by the people. And if the people are educated and understand and are smart, they will elect people who are rational and look at the facts and make rational decisions.
We have to look for leaders who have vision and leaders who are willing to take a risk and leaders who are willing to say, I don't care if I lose. This is important enough for us to fight.
You know, we have a political system that is designed to react, not to anticipate. And, at times we all wish for, I'd like to see more leadership on this issue, that issue, but fundamentally, what the Founding Fathers set up was a system that reacts to the will of the people. And that's why I said that emerging consensus with people that are increasingly living along the coast is going to matter in the debate that's going to come before us, because one, those people didn't live there 100 years ago. We had concentrations in places like New York or Chicago or LA, but not so much in towns and hamlets scattered along our coastal areas. And so I'd say it's difficult because change is hard and there hasn't been the level of vote count, of voice, necessary to propel some of those ideas.
Whenever we have a real or sometimes perceived health threat in this country, it's not only the public health officials who are concerned and the public, but this becomes then something that decision makers and our political representatives have to consider as well. And for state or county officials to do what they need to do does require resources.
I guess it was Churchill who once observed the beauty of the American political system is that it always does the right thing, after it's exhausted every other possible remedy. And so there is a degree, whether in our personal lives, whether in the body politic, as a reflection of personal opinion, wherein we hope for the best, and we until something sort of hits us in the face, we at times don't deal with it. We have a way of procrastinating, particularly with big issues, because they are hard.
And we can always have policy disputes. We're not going to agree on different policies, whether you're on the Republican side of the aisle or the Democratic side of the aisle. What we should agree upon, though, is transparency, truthfulness, and accountability at the political level.
Everybody talks about transparency, and it's a really catchy buzzword. You've got to really practice it. Government cannot de-vilify itself. We've got to have the folks come in and get to know us and then rebuild that trust with them from our standpoint.
I think we have to be willing to have honest conversations with one another. And a conversation is a two-way street. Yes, we can express our point of view, but it's equally or maybe even more important for us to listen. We've got two ears and one mouth. And if we would do more listening and then thinking about the points of views of other people, I think we can eliminate a lot of the political controversy that we seem to be running up against.
Big issues require leadership. And we got a lot of chiefs in the American society. That's the way our society works. Everybody's a chief. There are no Indians. And yet, for big issues to get solved, it requires a degree of unification, a degree of consensus that comes with, again, national leaders driving a stake in the ground and saying, this I believe to be true north. And then people will react to it. They'll react for it and against it, but it causes certain lines to form, and then you can have a debate about where that line ought to go. We don't yet have national leadership on this issue. It's why I went on the Gibson resolution. There are, I guess, only 20 Republicans that have done so. But I think that we need to step out and say, in whatever form we hold, this is a problem. And ultimately, it will take, for us to get real consensus in terms of federal, state, and local, it's going to require leadership at the presidential level.
Local communities along our coastline are not standing still. In New York, where Superstorm Sandy exposed much vulnerability, they are investing nearly $3 billion to build a wall in Lower Manhattan. In Miami Beach alone, a nearly $600 million mitigation effort is underway. All along the Eastern Seaboard, the Gulf and Pacific coasts, local responses are essential to confront a changing climate.
We need to think about the model. Right now, we will pay a bunch of money for disaster relief, but really we don't put that much money into disaster preparedness. And so I think that there are beginnings of conversations about how do you reorder public policy? Given the intensity and the frequency of storms lately, how do we do more not just to react to them, but to be prepared for them?
So you look at your policies of development and redevelopment. So when even a historic structure is renovated, looking at where that base floor elevation needs to be, and properties that were built in the wrong place. I mean, one mitigation may be that we have to purchase some of those properties, and we're applying for grants to do that. So it's a combination of planning policy and building codes to prepare for the future.
And so ultimately it comes down to economics, which is one of the things that's mentioned. We may have to literally raise that house, build a new foundation, which means it costs more. So fortunately, the city has grant funding available to help persons with that. Sometimes it means that person might have to contribute a certain portion of those dollars to that house renovation. And literally, what might have started out as a small renovation becomes a substantial rehab in order to ensure that we're really making that house sustainable for the long term.
We're going to have to fortify our edges. So we're working right now to restore the seawall, the low battery seawall. We replaced the corner section of it a couple of years ago. Now we're working on the low battery, and we're looking at building it 2.5 feet higher.
So my goal, in a small city, we're going to never get attention. So my attitude was, let's get out front. And we're at a point now where we're ready to get a grant for engineering on what we call the hotspots. We've identified the hotspots, the most vulnerable places. And the next is to get a grant and go ahead and engineer it so that when all of a sudden Washington wakes up, Columbia wakes up, and they say, we got to do something, I'll give them my drawings, I'll give them my plans, and I'll say, let Beaufort, South Carolina be a pilot project.
In Beaufort County in particular, we have a sea level rise adaptation plan that the county developed with the community in mind, and the community was very engaged in that stakeholder process. They ranked steps that you can take to address climate change and to make your community more resilient, such as prioritizing protection of high-risk areas, involving the community in education, investing in a transfer of development rights process so that you can transfer development rights from the high-risk areas to the safe areas with respect to rising seas, to invest in setbacks and beachfront retreat. Those are some tools that Beaufort County has prescribed, and I think that because they've been community-driven, there's an ownership over those tools and hopefully an ownership over those outcomes.
It doesn't need any more argument and discussion on, it needs action. And I think what the action is that you get a wide variety of disciplines and opinions, and we sit at the table and we determine what is important, based on all these factors, environmental, social, economics, and find out a real solution that's viable, that's economically sound, and sustainable long term to preserve and protect special places like this.
The leadership role here is to develop the agenda, to identify the project list and the priorities, to assign cost, to add them up, and then go raise the money to do it. And it's not that hard.
The impacts are clear, communities are responding, and the conversation is focused more than ever on resiliency, mitigation, and preservation. It's going to take a sea change of ideas, innovation, and investment to help our towns, cities, states, nation, and the world to meet this monumental challenge.
More information available online at scetv.org/c-change. Funding for this program is provided by the Medical University of South Carolina, Public Information and Community Outreach, MUSC, Changing What's Possible,